Hey everybody, it's your boy Marcus Norman from Gentleman Style Podcast, your host of a fabulous, incredible show. Today we have a special guest for you that's going to change the game and change how you do business and view business. I am absolutely excited to introduce this incredible man. I don't want to hold him back much further. Let's get to it. Here we go. Hey everybody, it's your boy Marcus Norman from Gentleman Style Podcast, your host of the #1 podcast coming to you live in America. And I want to give a quick shout out to Brandon Cotty. He is a new subscriber to the channel, VIP sponsor in the Funhouse Paranormal Activity. If you haven't checked out that video, go check it out in my YouTube channel. It is absolutely incredible. Mr. Brandon Crotty. Thank you, sir, for subscribing to the channel and being a VIP member. Those sponsorships help us take us to the next level. So I just wanted to touch on that. And now we go into the piece of resistance. Mr. Alex Sanfilippo, I hope I got that right, is a host of the Top 20 Entrepreneurship Podcast. And he is creating a brand almost, I want to say overnight. But obviously, with any entrepreneurship, it takes time. He's also the founder of PodMatch.com, a free service that automatically matches podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. He started his first business at the age of 10. Can you imagine? 10 years old, started his first business, and you'll never guess what it was. He was selling golf balls in his neighborhood and realizing that he really enjoyed generating sales and keeping track of profits. That's a very unique and powerful thing at the age of 10 years old. I don't even remember what I was doing at 10 years old. I was not selling anything except bad grades from my parents. His goal is to help others succeed in life and business. And he has devoted all his time to the service of others. So help me welcome to the stage the incredible, the amazing Mr. Alex Sanfilippo. Yay!
I laughed a few times during that intro you just did, and you got my last name right. So kudos to you, man. It's a great way to start this.
Thank you. I've been practicing all night long on that. Thank you, Mr. Filippo. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on the Gentleman Style Podcast show today. And I appreciate you because you're going to help us take us to do better business and get some of our time back. Right. So I appreciate you, sir.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to having this conversation with you. Also, I'm a fan of your show, so that makes it's like a win-win for me to be here.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So diving right in, how do you manage your time on a daily basis? What's the secret? Because you're in great shape. This guy is ripped, y'all.
All right. So time management comes from the start is prioritization, right? Like the first thing we have to think of is how we're going to prioritize our time. And I've learned this over years from not prioritizing my time. I had years of my life, I can go back to my early 20s especially, and Mark, it's probably the same for you. I think a lot of us in our early 20s, we just kind of go with the flow, right? Like we maybe are less intentional than we should be. I remember waking up at the beginning of a year, and it was the first year I was like, maybe I should set some New Year's resolutions. And I wrote down a few cheesy things. I mean, nothing big, but I remember a year later being back there and being like, what did I do this last year? Did I do anything? I was busy. I didn't have time to do anything. But then I decided that year, I'm like, you know what? Instead of making a New Year's resolution, I'm going to get control of my time and figure out what on earth I'm doing with it. So when I started actually documenting what I was doing with my time, which was as simple as carrying a pen and paper and walking around, and anything I did, I'd write it down, short of going to the bathroom and stuff like that, of course, right? Like I'm writing down the things I'm doing with my time. I realized that I was spending like 4 and 5 hours a day watching TV or playing video games, which not that there's anything wrong with those things, but I was spending my free time doing these things when I wasn't working. So I realized at an end of a year, I didn't have much to show for, or at least I didn't feel that way because I wasn't being intentional with my time. And for me, that's where it all begins. It's intentionality and knowing what you actually want to do with it. Because at the end of the day, you've got a lot of time. It's just using it the way you want to.
That's so true. And so you set out and you noticed early on that you needed to get back at your time by realizing how much time you were absolutely wasting. And that's big. That's where it starts, right? I think all of us, when we're on the goal of retirement, really what we're actually saying is we want our time back. Mm-hmm. And so that's powerful. In your self-reflection, what's an important part of your life that you have found in taking time to yourself?
Yeah, so this is really where it all comes from. I'm glad you asked that question, because for us, if we want to actually experience time freedom and we want to actually use our time intentionally, right? Like, these are the things that we want to do. It starts with self-reflection. So for me, that's what I did in that one New Year's, where I was just like, I got to change something. And when I did that self-reflecting, I realized, okay, there's some things I'd like to do in my life, and I can get into some of those. Some of them were start businesses, and you talked about when I was a real young kid, I realized I liked doing that. So I was like, well, I want to get out of a corporate job and actually do something on my own. That was one of those things that I wanted to actually do. And when I was realizing I wasn't using my time intentionally, I knew that through self-reflection, I'd be able to really figure out what I wanted to do. So a quick recommendation for everyone listening: if you're saying, okay, I'm not sure where my time is going, start off by setting some time aside to self-reflect. And what I mean by that is get a pen and paper. You're gonna hear me say this a lot. Like, get away from the phone, get away from the music, get away from other people for a little bit, even just a little bit of time. You can do this in just a few hours even. And for me, I live just a few minutes from the ocean in Jacksonville, Florida. So for me, it's always going out to the beach. I go by myself. Yes, thank you, right? Come on.
Beautiful.
Yes. So I get out there and I take a pen and paper, and I still do this on a regular basis. And I just sit there and think about, okay, where have I been over the last quarter? And for some people, it's longer than maybe it's the last year, but for me, it's every quarter. Where have I been? Where am I going? And then I can intentionally come back and do that same practice, pen and paper again, and say, okay, what am I doing with my time that's taking me further or closer to this new self-reflective vision that I have for myself? It's a very simple practice, but it does take a lot of self-discipline to actually implement. Because one of those things that, like, sitting on the couch and watching TV is a lot easier. Not there's necessarily anything wrong with it. You should set some time aside. For me with my wife, she loves doing that, so I'll hang out with her. But you've got to also think, okay, here's what I want to, where I want to be in the next 5 years. If I could just do 1% of that every day, I'll just get there, right? So can I do those little actions every single day? So it takes some self-discipline. It takes, again, that self-reflection to make sure that you're evaluating where you are, and then constantly just reviewing what you're doing with your time, because a lot of us don't have time or don't feel like we do because we're not using it intentionally. We're just letting it run itself. It's the same thing with keeping a budget. People are always like, oh, I don't want to keep a budget. It kind of like puts requirements on my money. But the truth is, it leads to freedom because you now know where your money's going. It's very similar to that. We should be doing the same thing with our time.
That's so true. That's so true. We have a unique question from the audience. One of our VIP sponsors asked, and so we got to get him up to the stage. Mr. Brandon Cotty of Funhouse. He asked, "Can't wait to check out PodMatch. How long has this been out?"
Okay, so yeah, first off, thank you. Love PodMatch. I'm actually wearing a shirt of it right now. I just didn't even realize that until just now. But I had a call earlier, and I usually would change into like a button up, and I just realized I didn't do that for you. I am so sorry, Marcus.
No, this is branding. This is all professional. I love it. I thought this was all part of the plan.
Well, fine, then it was. So actually, today is the 8th of March. I had the idea the 10th of March in 2020 is when the idea hit me, and I drew it on these whiteboards that are right behind me right now. And it was funny, I was right in the middle of a kettlebell workout outside, and I was like pondering this idea for podcasting. I just ran inside like halfway through the workout and just wrote it down on this whiteboard, called a friend that was a developer of mine that same night. And I was like, hey, need you on a project. We worked on one years prior. Would you be interested in doing something? And he said he just finished up a project that same, I guess, Sunday night. So now it's Tuesday night. And we went into a 50-50 partnership. And by June 15th, we launched into early beta. And here we are, almost a year later. Today, we actually broke 6,000 members today, which I'm super excited about.
Woo!
Marcus, I love your energy, man. You're fun, dude.
This is incredible. But I am excited for you, and I'm excited. I actually found you because when I found you, I was like, "What? There's no way he's gonna want to be on my show." And you responded because your information is so valuable, right? So much time we waste doing the things that we don't even care for. We spend a lot of time focusing on what's not our passion. And this pandemic has shown us that our employers don't care about us. In some cases, our government doesn't care about us. So we have to look after ourselves. And so that's why I wanted to point out the self-reflection, the time that you made for yourself, and then just wanting to go into the next level. How can someone begin getting more out of their life today?
Yeah, so it kind of plays off this thing of like really knowing what you're doing with your time. So taking that inventory and then doing some self-reflection. And then you've got to get real with yourself. Like, what do you really want with your life? And I can remember going back to like my early 20s. Again, I haven't always been the way I am now. Yes, I started real young in business, but I got into corporate, which I ended up liking for some parts of my life and others not so much. But I realized I had woken up just in a life that wasn't what I wanted. And it took me actually going back to that childhood moment when I was 10 years old, as Marcus talked about in the intro, selling those used golf balls. When I was reflecting, I was thinking back to that, like, that's what I enjoyed. I liked doing that. And yes, I don't want to get into used golf ball sales again. That was really cute for a 10-year-old kid, and golfers would love that. Now a guy in his 30s, if I try to sell him a used golf ball, I'm just going to get punched or laughed at. I don't know. But because we literally sit on the golf course and do that. But anyway, going back to that whole thing, like we've got to think back to our lives. If you want to get more out of it, you got to think, okay, what are the things that have brought me the most fulfillment? What has brought me the most joy? What is something I'm just naturally really good at? And a lot of us, myself included, I didn't know. And someone gave me this great advice. I did not make this up myself. So Marcus, don't quote me for saying this. Somebody told me, ask your closest friends what you're good at, and they will tell you something about you that you don't know. Ask your closest friends what you're good at, and they'll tell you something about yourself you don't know. The reason that I found that to be true is because we're too close to ourselves to often influence. We don't even realize some of our natural abilities and talents. And when I went out and started asking some of my close friends, and I've been blessed to just have some great friendships in my life, met most of them through church small groups, and that's just kind of been the foundation for me. But when I started asking them, they started telling me things about myself that I was like, I'm good at that. Like I do that. And they're like, yeah, it's everyone knows that. And people like agree and things like that. I was too close to realize some things about myself. So again, think back to your childhood, the things that you've enjoyed, and then ask people around you, hey, what am I naturally good at? What do I do like in this friendship? How do I contribute? And you'll start learning some things about yourself that you don't realize. As a matter of fact, I would have never jumped on a podcast or ever got on a stage if people didn't tell me that that was something I was naturally good at. I did it at church occasionally, but I was like, I'm not good at this. This is just something I do. And then I realized people started calling out like, no, Alex, you have a gift for this. Why don't you get out there and try doing more of it? And here I am today talking with Marcus and all of you.
He has that radio voice, y'all. It's the radio voice. That's all it is. I appreciate this. This is powerful. Hey, y'all, we got to go to a quick commercial break. We got to pay some bills, but we will be right back. Stay tuned to Mr. Alex Sanfilippo, and he is spilling some tea. See you guys soon. Good day, podcast listeners. This is your boy, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I wanted to let you guys know that we will be rolling out a new feature and adding a join sponsor button next to the subscriber button here at the bottom of your screen. Once you click the button, it will display 3 membership levels. Gentleman Gentry, which is our entry level, Duke Duchess, which is our season level, and the Emperor and Empress, which is our most sophisticated level, which you will receive unique perks and benefits at each differing level and gain access to our community tab. We will also be sharing polls, upcoming events, and interviews, as well as receive feedback from our sponsors directly. Your support helps me find new and exciting guests to bring to the stage live. Well, in order to get the higher end speakers, it requires, you guessed it, money. So thank you for tuning in to my channel. And if becoming a sponsor sounds good to you, then select the join button below and choose your desired sponsor level. Let's continue to grow and serve the future of generations of men and women to come. Love you guys. Bye. We are back. We have the incredible, amazing, super fragilistic, espialidocious Mr. Alex Sanfilippo, and he is spilling some great tea on how to, first off, take some self-discovery and find out what it is you are passionate about, and asking your closest friends on what it is you are naturally good at. What is it your friends know you for, right? People never forget. People never remember what you say, but people always remember how you make them feel. And so that's powerful. Alex is teaching us the game right now. Mr. Alex, our podcast listeners, we just did an interview on SaaS businesses. But you have a lot of experience, not some. What are some ways to begin growing a bootstrap SaaS business organically? And if you all don't know what SaaS is a subscription-based business. So a subscription model business that helps you take your business and grow it slowly. So Alex, help us out.
Yeah, for sure. So SaaS literally stands for software as a service, as you kind of alluded to there. And bootstrapping simply means that you're doing it with your own money, right? Or a very small investment. Like I'm not looking out for VC, so venture capital or taking a loan or anything like that. So with my company, PodMatch, we launched it with $5,000. Going back to me and my business partner, Jesse, we decided right when we were getting started, we said, hey, I told him, I'm like, I'm going to drop $5,000 in this account and we're just going to see what we can do with this. We can see if we can come up with an MVP, minimum viable product, and see if just at the entry level, if people like it. If not, we're just going to scrap it and go do something else. But that's kind of how we got the whole thing started. And it just started from day one, us saying, okay, we set the foundation, the limit. And I think that's a really important thing. When people say they want to bootstrap, but they keep on putting money in, eventually it's not bootstrapping, right? Like eventually, like it kind of defeats the purpose. So they start getting loans. I'm like, no, you're going after venture capitalists, you're going after loans, and you can still bootstrap to a certain extent. But like a true organic bootstrapping in my mind is saying, here's what we're going to do. Here's how long we're going to try it for. If the money runs out and we can't prove the concept, then we're going to stop. And so what we did is we threw $5,000 in the account. What we did is we launched with 100 people into early beta, and we asked them to test everything. And here's the thing, like I didn't spend too much time working on what's called user experience, so UX as it's called, which means it's not the prettiest website you've ever seen. And we're still to this day improving it, but from day one, it was basically just text. And I told the people, I'm like, don't get upset with the way it looks. Tell me if it works. Like, tell me if it works first. And I've come to realize there's a lot of people that focus way too much on making something look super polished and perfect. Like they really go for it on that level, but they don't spend the time actually validating if the problem they're solving is real or the service they're providing is actually going to help somebody. So for us, we went complete opposite of that. We said, hey, you know what? Doesn't look great, but we need to see if it works. And thankfully it did. Those 100 people launched, and we ended up with 1,000 people within just the first 30 days that decided, hey, we're going to jump on with this thing. So we really proved the concept, and from there we just started building it out. But not to fast forward too far ahead, but thankfully we never had to put any money in it after that. We got that 5,000 back, and since then we've been able to just reinvest the money that we're making, and it's worked really well for us doing it that way.
That's incredible. That's incredible growth. And that takes drive, that takes vision. You're a visionary, sir. That's huge.
Thank you.
That's huge to be able to see something and not know the full plan, but say, hey, we're going to make this work. And if it doesn't, it's okay. Right? You were okay with failure, and you didn't fail. And I think that's why you succeeded, to be honest. That's why most of us would do better working for ourselves. So that's huge. There, in the age of COVID, in the age of the pandemic, there's a lot of podcasters up and coming, people that want to start their own channel, want to start their own YouTube channel, and get in a podcast space. Can a podcast be used to grow your brand? And should everyone start one, or is it just a unique few?
So first off, to answer that question if everyone should start one, I don't think everyone should start one. I do think there's always opportunity there, but here's the deal, Marcus, you make this look really easy what you're doing right now. There's a ton of work that goes into this when people aren't watching, right? Like you're laughing because you know the truth. Like everyone who's here hanging out with us right now, like you do this is actually the best StreamYard like live podcast I've ever been on. Like you do a killer job, but I know that doesn't happen just because you hit play. That happens because of the hours that people don't see in the background. So when people are like, oh, I want to start a podcast, it's because they're looking at what you've done here and they're like, oh, cool, this looks like fun. But they don't know the amount of work that goes into it while everyone else is sleeping. And you're like, oh my gosh, how is this going to happen, right? Like I call podcasting a labor of love. And I don't want to discourage people because I have my own show called Creating a Brand, and I love it. It's like my biggest hobby. I have so much fun doing it. It helped give me the credibility to launch PodMatch. So I'm not telling you not to do it. You just need to weigh the cost. It is serious work if you're going to do it right and actually stick with it. And so, yeah, I think that you can start a podcast, and I think you should if you really have that desire. And here's how you really position it to help you monetize and do whatever you want to do, or build more credibility or make yourself stand out as a subject matter expert or some sort of authority. It has to be really, really focused. Like it cannot be a general podcast. The days of general podcasts are really behind us because during COVID, so many people launched shows. I mean, we went from less than a year ago, like 1 million podcasts, almost 2 million. I mean, it just spiked. Like it jumped up so far. But a lot of people they quit after 90 days. They're like, there's just not a lot of people listening. It's because they go really general. So Marcus, what I want to share here quickly is to really get focused on it. Like that is the biggest thing you can do. And I'll share one example of somebody I recently saw. And I've shared this example like a lot because it just blew my mind. There was this lady who I ran into on LinkedIn. We were having a conversation back and forth. And her podcast, her audience that she speaks to are empty nesters. Is that how you say it? Like
yes, yep.
Okay, empty nesters that are single and that have AIDS. And that is who she speaks to. And I was like, that is so specific. I'm like, do you have listeners? She has tens of thousands of listeners, the people that actually somehow fall into that category of individuals. And she just has all of them. And she does a good job speaking just to those people. That might sound strange to most of us, but that is that's where some people actually are. Like that's their life. And they now have a tribe to be part of. And some people are like, wow, that's really focused, right? Like, and it's hard to get it that narrowed down. But what you want to do is kind of find a sweet spot of like, hey, is there more than 10 people that will understand what I'm talking about here? And less than maybe 10 or 20,000, like in all of the world. And can I find a way to connect those people? Because again, people are looking for somebody that can speak to them about what they're specifically going through. And the internet has connected us in that way that people now know I can search for this, find a tribe that I really 100% fit in. And if you can really create that, then you're going to build a name for yourself in that space. And you're honestly going to help provide a lot of value to the world. And ultimately, that's what it should be all about, I believe.
That's powerful. I got some jewels from that. So it sounds like niche down, right?
Yeah.
Niche down, get very specific, get dangerously specific at what it is you want to talk about on your and build your brand around that, and you will find your tribe. But also focus. Let's just talk about focus in general. Focus on one thing. I know you see it. People kind of, I want to do a blog. I want to be on Instagram. I want to be on Facebook. I want to be on Twitter. I want to be TikToking, right? Focus, right? And you just said it. And that is also a key point that I wanted to point out that you mentioned as the expert and has been doing this, right? What are some other key points that or advice that you can give to someone who's just getting started in business or just getting started in branding themselves? What are some other key points?
You mentioned focus, which I love to use focus as an acronym, and which stands for follow one course until successful. Follow one course until successful. That to me is what focus means. So don't jump all around the place and be like, "Ooh, I'm going to focus on this today." No, follow that course until you succeed in it, or just know I don't like this, or it's just not going to work. But follow one course till successful is so important. And the other thing that I want to mention real quick, and I'll kind of dive into something more specific, is stay consistent. Marcus, you asked me about podcasts earlier. So yeah, there's about 2 million podcasts now. But if you dive down to active podcast, which means podcasts have posted an episode in the last 90 days and have more than 10 episodes. So again, 2 million at the top level, but then you look at the active podcast with more than 10 episodes. There's only 400,000 shows. So that's less than 25%. I mean, I'm not great with math. Closer to 20%, I think, right? Of actual podcast ever pass that milestone having more than 10 episodes and do it consistently. Like that's kind of crazy to think about. Like, yeah, there's 2 million at the top level, but if you can just stick with it, you'll do really well. And to kind of shift gears here now, I'll move into like how you can really figure this stuff out. It kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, Marcus. I like this is kind of all tying together. That's always a great thing. We're talking about that self-reflecting, asking people what you're good at and things like that. What you need to do is find the unique problem that you can solve given your natural abilities and skills. So look at what you're naturally been made for. For me, like I'm a believer. So for me, I look at like, hey, what did Jesus give me that I have today? Like, what can I do to serve the world? And that's what I go for, man. Like, how can I add value to the world? And I know you probably have this quote from me because everyone hears me say it at some point. But like for me, I say I seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit. Look at that. You put it up before I even said it. Come on.
Sorry, I got excited. But my clicker finger got excited.
That is good. So what you can do with that is you can kind of narrow in on like, okay, here is the value that I know I can add to people. Like if somebody is struggling with this, like I know that I can serve that individual. And when you can find that space, seek to just solve that one problem for that person. Don't do what Marcus was saying. Like to his point, don't be like, okay, I can help this person, but let me go ahead and get a YouTube started. Let me launch my podcast. Let me get my blog going. Let me get on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Like, don't do all that because you spread yourself so thin. What you want to do is figure out, okay, this person that I can serve is on LinkedIn. I'm going to hang out on LinkedIn and serve this individual and anybody else like them that I can happen to find, and just do your best to do that and start really narrow like that. And over time, you can add more to it. But I think there's too many of us, we don't really make an impact because we just spread ourselves so thin and we're trying to be everything to everyone. When really we should just be someone for one person who needs us most. And by doing that, I really think that we can serve the world in a more meaningful way. And that's how I've built businesses. That's how I built PodMatch, was serving that one person. It's how I launched my podcast. It's the same thing that I try to do and replicate everywhere that I possibly can.
Amen. Amen. That was a word, man. I wish I had a choir. That's the one thing I can't get on the podcast.
We got to how to make that happen. There's got to be a way. No one's ever done it. You've got to figure it out, Marcus. I think you're the guy.
I will figure it out. Jesus. Okay. But thank you for that. That is huge, y'all. That's huge. And so get focus on one course until successful. I follow one course until successful. I absolutely love that. We are going to be right back. We got one more commercial, y'all, but stay tuned, stay engaged, stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right
I'm Marcus Norman, bringing fresh vibes to hot topics surrounding culture, relationships, business, finance, sex, dating, faith, and everything in between. Whether you're into passive income opportunities, trending topics and useful relationship tips, or dynamic guest speakers, there's something for everyone. You can expect all that and more every week. If you're down with this content, then consider joining our growing community by subscribing to Gentleman Style Podcast and smash the bell to get on our VIP list. Your support means the world. Thanks for watching. Link to my channel.
Thank you all for tuning in to Gentleman Style Podcast Show. We have the incredible Mr. Alex Sanfilippo.
Man, you had it the whole time until now. Alex Sanfilippo. You were there the whole time.
Alex Sanfilippo, the incredible Mr. Alex Sanfilippo. And he is teaching us and spilling some incredible tea right now on taking us to the next level, taking our brand to the next level. Mr. Alex, what book would you recommend every man or woman should read?
I think right now, so there for me, I have to say the Bible. There's other books. I'll mention that. It's kind of like a giveaway for me. But something I do every day that I recommend people do, even if you're not a believer, read the book of Proverbs every day. There's 31 chapters, so it works great. Like on the first, read chapter 1. The second, read chapter 2, and so on and so forth. Right? There's a lot of wisdom in that, and I've actually found that most business books that I love seem to just pull stuff straight from that book. So I'm just kind of going to the source with that. But so the book of Proverbs is really great from the Bible. Outside of that, something that's really, I think, relevant in today's world, there's a book called, it's by Nir Eyal, and it's called Traction. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up his book with somebody else. What is his book called? Indistractable. Sorry. Nir Eyal has a book called Indistractable. And it's around the concept of how we live in a very distracted world and how we need to make room for traction, as he calls it, instead of distraction. And he just talks about some very practical ways that you can be doing this. So super, super valuable. I think it's a book that should be on every shelf at least in America right now, because we're so driven by whatever's happening next in front of us, and we're not leaving room for actual traction to get things done. So that's Indistractable by Nir Eyal. Really great book.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to check that out. The beauty of this show, this podcast, is I can always go back and steal these nuggets, but I'm still taking notes anyway. What is your favorite way to give back to your community, Mr. Alex? You do so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. My favorite, I really love actually just getting in and serving somebody. So for me, it's always the random thing I seem to enjoy the most. So I live in Florida. We have storms here. That's not a surprise to anyone unless you never turn on the TV. There's storms here. And that usually means there's a lot to pick up in people's yards and things like that, or there's flooding. I love the opportunity to go help somebody that's in a bad situation like that. And one in particular, I think back to last year, a friend of ours, they live kind of more in the woods and right off the river. And this storm came through. Thankfully, nothing messed with their house, but their yard was just a mess. I mean, there was trees, there was everything. And we went out there and just the whole day we spent cleaning it up with this individual. And then we went to their neighbors and just kept on doing that all through the day. And I just remember at the end of the day, we drove 15 minutes and we're sitting out there at the ocean, all of us together, the people whose houses we helped. We just kind of hung out. I love that opportunity just to serve somebody who's in need. And that was a really cool moment for me, I'd say.
That was really cool.
Are you crying? Is that what that was? Was it tear?
You almost got me. You almost got me. I almost. That's powerful. That's unique. The world needs more men like you. That's huge, right? To give of yourself in that way when you didn't have to, right? Yeah. Everyone is kind of for themselves, especially now in this pandemic. But you gave of yourself, and that's huge. And that's what we need more of. That's what changes the world. Sir, how can my audience connect with you? How can my audience support you? And how can we uplift you and give back and grow with you?
Man, first off, I'm just going to say you have a great podcast here. Any podcast that has led me to take notes. I was listening to one earlier. You interviewed a 27 or 28-year-old guy, Todd Baldwin, who's a young millionaire. Really great episode. People should go back and listen to that. I think it was maybe in January or something like that. I'm always a little bit behind on podcasts, by the way. But I took a lot of notes from it. So for me, I just tell your listeners, hang with this guy, man. Marcus has got it. This is a good spot. If you are curious to learn more about me, he had the link up earlier. You can just go to creatingabrand.com/free. And that's where you can find everything about me. My social links are there. You can find PodMatch there, or just go to podmatch.com. But really, that's it. And again, my recommendation is hang with Marcus because he's doing some great things with his show.
I thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. I try really hard to provide value, right? That's a scripture in the Bible. Whoever serves the most, right? The Bible doesn't always talk about monetary gain or how much money I'm gonna bless you with. It says serve, be a servant, serve.
Mhm.
Even Jesus served, right? He was a servant. Although
Yeah.
he was the great I am, he was a servant. He was not against washing your feet. He could have kingdoms and palaces and nice horses and carriages. He rode a donkey, right?
Right. Yeah.
And he traveled with his people. So whoever serves the most, that's where I find my value, and that's where I needed to reach out to you to get you to my audience, because you are dynamic. Thank you for that, sir. I thank you all for tuning in to Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I appreciate you all. We gotta let Mr. Alex go because he has several businesses to run and several companies to run. But sir, I appreciate you. Please don't stop what you're doing. Don't ever give up. The world needs you. We need you, and so please don't ever quit.
Thanks, Marcus. This was an honor to be here, and honestly, I'm feeling inspired and motivated now, just even as a guest. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you all, my audience, for tuning into the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I appreciate you. I love you guys. Thank you for sticking with me and we have so much more to accomplish, and we are shooting for the stars, y'all. We are taking it to the next level. So like I always say, like I end every show, take care of your families, take care of your homes, and take care of business. This is Marcus Norman and Mr. Alex Sanfilippo signing off. Love you guys. Bye.